Welcome back to another episode of SaaS Buyers Club. I'm your host, Omeed, and this week I'm interviewing Kevin McArdle. Kevin McArdle is one of the founders of BigBand software. And what BigBand does is they buy and operate great B2B SaaS companies. Kevin, great to have you here this week.
Thanks, Omeed. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I'd love to start the episode. Obviously, you're in the business of buying SaaS businesses, but I'd love to hear a little bit more from you in terms of, what BigBand is, what they're about, what they stand for. Love the audience to get, some of that context on BigBand directly from you.
Yeah, so we're a B2B SaaS holding company, which means we're not a fund. I'm not a GP and we don't have LPs. We have operating partners and we have passive investors, people who put money in. And our goal is to buy and operate great B2B SaaS companies with no intent to sell them because we have no requirement to return capital to our investors. Everybody in the business and on the cap table is just interested in building enterprise value and compounding for as long as we can.
Got it. So you buy and hold SaaS companies for the long term. And how big is your portfolio of SaaS companies currently?
Currently, we just launched this time last year. So we have 2 companies in the portfolio as of May 2024 when we're recording, and have 3 more that I hope to close in the next 90 days. So small but growing portfolio.
Yeah, growing fast.
But I should note that, BigBand is new, but I've been in the business of buying companies for a long time, and as have my partners, Chris and Jason. And so we came together to form BigBand based on all of our years of experience and, collective experience of acquiring 50 companies. Almost all of those were SaaS, and our capital partners as well. I've learned a ton and have a lot of experience in acquiring businesses. So the brand is new, the portfolio is small but growing, but we've got a lot of experience behind us.
Cool. Yeah, love that background. Like, did you come from PE or?
I guess technically, so most of my career was spent in corporate America at a big enterprise software company called Cerner that makes electronic medical records. And so that's how I cut my teeth in business in sales and operations and learned just about everything there is to know about running a software company. But it was a giant software company. And then along the way, I partnered with a couple of financial backers and started acquiring businesses on my own. So technically private equity, but very small in terms of the deals we were doing, the amount of capital that we had. Collective expertise was like 0, and I was learning on the job, and then figured out that I like it, figured out it's a great business model, and just realized that I wanted to do something a little bit bigger and a little bit better with different partners. And so that's how I launched BigBand. So technically private equity, but that makes it sound like I was working for a proper firm, and that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, I get that. And so in terms of acquiring companies, what is your favorite part of the process? Like, what do you enjoy about acquiring companies? What do you see as like kind of your special gift when it comes to acquiring companies? Are you the guy that analyzes deals? Are you the one that finds the deals and connects with the founders and creates those relationships? Which part of the deal do you say that you excel at most?
That's a great question. Let me describe the rest of the team, and then I'll explain a little bit more what I do and what I love. So my partner, Chris, leads acquisitions. So he's the tip of the spear, finding great companies, processing inbound leads, and giving it that first, like, is this a fit or is it not, before we spend time on it. My partner, Jason, is our chief operating officer. He manages the existing portfolio. He's also a CFO by training. So he's crunching the numbers, and acquisitions is a team sport at BigBand. So we all look at any deal that's at all interesting. The 3 of us are looking at. We have a young lady named Chloe who's an analyst on our team. She leans in and helps gathering data, working with founders to understand the business. My role is to try to be the conductor of the band and support Chris and Jason, whatever they need. To answer your question though, my favorite part of the job is talking with founders. Even if we don't end up doing a deal with them, even if they're not interested in selling, like, because of who I am and what I do, I get a lot of people reach out to me that say, like, how does this even work? I don't know where to start. I was just emailing with a founder this morning where he's like, I'd like to have some idea of what my business is worth, even though I'm probably not interested in selling for a few years. And I've learned that it's kind of a case where like I'm a fish that sometimes forgets that I'm inside water. You know what I mean? Like, because we do this every day, I have to remind myself that other people don't understand how this works, right? Like other people don't know how you go about selling a business. They don't know how to go about buying a business. And so I'm happy to educate folks on what I know and help entrepreneurs have a better outcome, even if it's not selling to us. So I find myself on the phone or on video chats with founders or meeting in person all the time. And I love that. I love entrepreneurship. I admire anybody who has the guts to start a business, and those that grow successful businesses. It's part of what makes the worldwide economy work. And I just love learning how people figure out how to make money. And so, especially in the software space, because from your work, like there's so many niches and creative ways that people can, build a business. And so that's my favorite part of the job, just interacting with entrepreneurs, learning about their business, offering advice if they ask. And, of course, celebrating closing a deal is really fun, but fortunately we're set up to do that at a very high volume. I anticipate that will be a regular occurrence, but if you don't love the process, it's hard to just wait for that deal closing to be the thing that you get excited about, is how I look at it. So I love the process, and that's my favorite part of the job, just talking to entrepreneurs and learning about their businesses.
Awesome. I actually 100% resonate with that. That actually is my favorite part of what I do as well. So when people ask me, I love connecting with founders. I love supporting founders. I love helping founders make money. I love helping people make money just in general. So I very much, very much resonate with that. And so the question that arises from what you shared, based on the fact that you love talking to founders, what do you find yourself constantly telling founders? Like I think that's a great topic for the show, because we have an opportunity here for anyone who listens to the show for them to actually just pretty much have that conversation with you right here, right now. So it's like, what are you often advising founders with respect to?
I'm glad you asked. Whatever people need, I'm happy to help. But the recurring advice that I am giving people is to start thinking about your exit way earlier than you think you should. And the conventional wisdom out there, if you talk to investment bankers or business brokers, people will say, start planning 2 to 3 years before you're ready to exit. I think that's terrible advice. I think this should be an ongoing exercise where entrepreneurs are planning for an exit, even if they don't think they're going to exit for 10 years. And there's probably reasons why bankers and brokers give that advice, because they don't want to spend a lot of time on people who are not going to exit for 5 to 7 years. I think that's short-sighted, but whatever, it's their business. I got so frustrated with sort of this lack of awareness of how the process works, and founders, even those who are ready, they approach me to sell their business and they're just not ready. Like they don't understand the game that's being played. They don't understand the terminology that's needed. They may not have somebody like you on their team to help them get a deal done. And so I get frustrated with people's lack of preparedness, not because it slows us down, but because I know that means you're going to have a worse outcome because you're not ready. And we say within BigBand, we only use our powers for good, but I know not everybody thinks that way. And when I mean powers, I've forgotten more about acquiring businesses than most people know, just because I've been doing it for so long. And if you're a founder and you've got one business, you've got one shot to bring home a pile of money when you sell that business. And so who has the information advantage, you or me? I do, of course. And so we don't use that information advantage to take advantage of founders, but I know other people do. So the advice that I've been giving founders consistently for a long time is start planning early. And I actually secured the domain Annual Exit Planning to create a work, which you can share in the show notes, give to people, annualexitplanning.com. I created a workbook to help people think through the process of exiting. There's a little bit of education in there, helps founders think through timing. What's the right number? Am I aligned with my co-founders on what we all want? If you have co-founders, who are the people I need on my team? All these things that, to answer your question, I was giving this consistent advice. And I thought, I can save myself a bunch of time and get this broadly distributed to people by creating the website. It's a free workbook. I believe annual exit planning is just as important as annual strategic planning, but nobody does it. And to prove that nobody talks about it in that way, annualexitplanning.com cost me $6.99 on GoDaddy. So apparently I'm the first guy to kind of coin the phrase, and it seems to be resonating with people. Like I've given a couple talks about annual exit planning at conferences. I've been invited to speak to, groups big and small, and consistently founders are like, wow, I've never really thought about it like this. Or you gave me a whole bunch of things to consider that I hadn't considered before. That feels good that people, the message seems to be resonating, and that now I'll say to founders like, here, read this. Cause this is, like you said, this is a lot of the advice that I end up giving. Read that. And then let's talk about more specifics of your situation, so we can not just have the same conversation I always have, but have, hopefully a more in-depth conversation after somebody's downloaded the workbook, read the materials, thought through some of those things. And anyway, that's kind of the consistent advice I get.
Cool. Yeah. So plan for the exit from the beginning. That's like what we tell all the founders too. Like, because most of the founders, we're totally aligned.
Another reason why I don't like the advice of like, get ready 2 years in advance is like that assumes that you know exactly the date that you're going to be ready to exit. That doesn't help somebody if you get just an inbound pleasant surprise, like somebody just says, hey, I'd like to buy your business, which happens all the time. You need to be ready to respond. And if you haven't done that planning in advance, you're not going to be as prepared. And unfortunately, tragic things happen. People get sick. Spouses and partners get sick. Somebody might die. And like you might end up in a situation where you're either forced to sell a business, or you just you desperately want to, for whatever reason. And if you haven't been doing this preparation, you're not going to have as good of an outcome. So I'm glad we're aligned on that advice.
Yeah, totally aligned. Our other position is 2 years out is better than never planning for the exit.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I like to say, like, okay, I tell people, if you've been in business for more than 2 years, let's just assume any business, first 2 years is survival. Okay. And if you've gotten to, it's an arbitrary date, but okay, you're 2 years old. If your business is going to survive, start exit planning right then. You're right. It's never too late to plant a tree, but early and often is what I believe should be the case, even if somebody thinks they're going to run their business for the next 20 years.
Because here's the reality that we often see, especially in lower middle market deals, is when the seller is ready to sell, they usually go to market and they have done almost no exit planning. And that's what
you're seeing really the same thing I am.
Yeah. That's what we really don't like to see. We also, the other kind of point that we often make to sellers too is don't wait to sell. Like, don't wait too long to sell. Sell when things are good. And I think annual exit planning really helps with that, because it sets a benchmark and creates kind of a milestone understanding of, okay, this is when, we said this is when we're going to let the company go. And when you reach that milestone, it helps with the self-awareness piece, which we've talked about on the show a lot with a lot of different people, about how important self-awareness is for founders. Because what founders often, the situations that they find themselves in is they're burnt out in the business, and then they're at the point where it's like, I have to get rid of this thing. Yeah. And that's not where you want to be.
Yep. And desperation does not create good outcomes. I love that notion of self-awareness. I also, I mentioned, but I think it's important to repeat, if there's more than one owner of a business, the odds that those two or more individuals are going to be on exactly the same page of when to exit and either the amount of money they want or the timing is like close to zero. And so part of my annual exit planning exercise is for any co-founders to do the workbook separately and then come together and talk about it. Because if you're not on the same page, you got to talk about it and come up with a plan. So no, I agree with your self-awareness piece. And it's okay to change one's mind. If you've got a milestone where you say, this is where I want to sell, and then you hit that milestone and you want to set a new milestone, like that's fine. But just kind of wandering around and not having a plan is not good for anybody. And it's not good for the business. It's not good for your employees. Yeah, because if somebody hits a point of burnout, like the business will suffer. Another concept that I want to, that's a specific part of the workbook that I'm shocked how few founders take this approach, is to like approach and build relationships with people who might buy your business. I had a guy call me. He's got a wonderful software company that unfortunately is too small for us. He's like, hey, I want to sell. I'm like, okay, well, do you know anybody? And I can't mention like we're any founder that talks to me, it's assumed to be under NDA, but I'm like, do you know anybody in your industry that's got a related business? He's like, oh yeah, I know these companies. Do you know the founder? Do you know the CEO? I was like, no, I've never talked to them. I'm like, okay, well, do you know anybody else besides me that buys businesses? He's like, well, I know who they are, but I've never talked to them. And so he's like, decided I want to sell right now. And he's not prepared, no relationships with anybody, including industry strategic partners that could acquire his business. And he could approach them now. But wouldn't it be great if he had built up a relationship with those people over the last 4, 5, 6 years as he was building his business, so that they know who he is, know his business, and are more interested in the conversation by the time he sends them an email?
We're super aligned. That's my other talking point that I'm like, every time I talk to founders, I'm like, and the thing is his inbox is probably full of people that have been making offers.
Right.
Dude.
Yeah. And it's how do you advise people? I get this question a lot because anybody running a successful business, they're getting inbound email, cold emails from, could be people like, we don't spam people, but I do. When I see a cool piece of software that on the internet or that I use, I will always email the founder and just be like, I'm a fan. I'm a user. Awesome company. And FYI, if you're ever interested in selling, call me. Like that passive. But I know there's a lot of people that, spam entrepreneurs. How do you advise people to like respond or not to those emails?
So I just had this conversation with the founder 2 days ago. Really cool real estate tech. And, he's like, oh, my inbox is like full of people that want to invest or buy my company. I don't ever respond to them. And I'm like, set up a process. Actually, like, vet them. So like whether it, get a VA, set up like an application or something or like a questionnaire, and figure out get information on these people, because the feedback I always get, well, it's a full-time job building relationships with potential acquirers or investors because I get so much inbound. And I'm like, okay, well, you need a system to identify who it actually makes most sense to connect with and build that relationship with.
Yeah, don't build a relationship with everybody.
With everyone.
Pick a few where there's a reason to like them and go ahead and build those relationships. I think that's smart.
So you just need criteria of like, okay, who is it that you're looking to build a relationship with? Create a questionnaire around that criteria, find a way and a system to filter the inbound through that criteria system, and then focus on those relationships that make most sense. That was the advice that I gave him.
I think that's great. The only thing I would add to it is I was having this conversation with a founder myself. I didn't go the vetting and the form thing. I like that idea. I'm going to steal that. But
that's cool, man.
You should have just like an auto response or a canned thing you can cut and paste, or have your assistant do it. I'm not raising money or talking to acquirers right now because business is booming and I got my head down. I will add you to my newsletter. And we send out a newsletter once a month. I think any business should be sending out a newsletter once a month minimum to their stakeholders, to their fans, to their customers, etc. So I'll add you to my newsletter so you can keep up, and I'll let you know when and if that I will. The other side of it, I'll add you to the long list of people like you who have expressed interest in my business. So just like not you don't want to sound overly cocky, but like, business is great. Long list of people, I'll keep in touch, but sort of like, I'll call you, don't call me response. But I do love the filtering because I get emails from people that it's like, did you do any that like, hey, we're interested. We'd love to buy BigBand. I'm like, did you do any research? Obviously not. So, and like, you go to the website and it's opaque and like, so I think the form should be like, who are you? Do you actually have money? How many businesses have you bought? How many of them look like mine? Tell me something about my business that you like. So like something specific, right?
Yeah.
This is
vision. Vision,
like,
portfolio.
Why did you email me? Yeah,
exactly.
And probably
make them work.
Make them work. Make them do something.
Make them work.
Don't make me work. And I bet half of the people that email will never fill out the form. And so then, you just cross them off the list. But yeah. I
And
do
I think
think
the other
some sort
thing,
of response is good, and just ignoring is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But, and I do wish fewer, it gives business acquirers like us a bad name, that like these people just spam founders with no, they either, pay a VA to do it, or they just like buy lists and email everybody. I can't imagine that yields many actual deals, but
it
it
must
gives us
work.
all a bad reputation. Does it? Like, I've never talked to anybody who said they just cold emailed a big list and actually got a deal out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to here in Cincinnati a founder of a PE firm, and I think with cold emails, it's just, what do they say? It takes like 7 to 10 emails or whatever before
For some
like
years,
one of them hit. Yeah, so the
Yeah.
spam, just the frequency of the spam is, I guess, what works. But yeah, I mean,
There's also an aspect of it, and I'm, maybe too cynical, but like, if somebody's listening to this podcast, they probably pay attention to Constellation software like I do.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for almost approaching 30 years and have hundreds of companies. And in all of their annual letters and their marketing materials, they brag about how they have a database of like 45,000.
Yeah.
I've talked to people that either work at Constellation or used to, and they've got incentives. They've got like hundreds of people with acquisitions or biz dev in their title. And these people are measured on how often they're emailing founders, not how often it comes back. Just like, did you send something every 90 days to these people? They're very smart people. There must be a reason why they're doing it, other than just to keep 500 folks busy. And I've talked to other big PE firms who have the same process. Like, we just constantly want to reach out to people. It is annoying to founders, so we don't take that approach. I would rather take a more personal approach and like meet with people in real life if I'm going to be in their town, or invite them to some event that I'm attending, and try to build a real relationship. But I assume people who are getting started, or smaller firms, they read the same thing. Oh, if Constellation does it, that should be something I do too. So let me build my process to spam people. They don't call it spam, but like cold email and build relationships.
Yeah, consistent, persistent contact.
Yeah.
Colloquial for spam, or
Right.
a better way to refer to spam. Persistent contact. Cool. So circling back, I would love to dive more into the annual. It's called the annual exit planning. Is that what it's called? Annual exit planning.
Yep.
Cool. So what do you like to see from founders in terms of what would be like the perfect scenario where you're going to buy a company and it's perfect in terms of what you're looking for? What does that look like?
Well, for us, we only deal with B2B SaaS businesses. We like buying profitable businesses. So something that's growing, profitable, in a healthy, enduring niche, we're interested. So it does it's as broad as that. And like 2 million in annual recurring revenue and higher, no ceiling necessarily, but we like to buy smaller businesses. So like 2 to 10 million in annual recurring revenue is kind of in our wheelhouse. And what I like to see from founders, and what I try to coach people through this annual exit planning process, is just have your act together. Like, be ready. Know what you're looking for. I talk to founders all the time that approach me and like, I want to get a deal done. Okay. It's like, but they are like, well, I could sell, or I sell outright, or I might take on minority investors, or you might be willing to take majority investors under certain circumstances. And like, I kind of want to stop the conversation. Those are 3 very drastically different paths. And if you're not sure which of those 3 you want to go down, like, you're probably wasting everybody's time. And I get that people have different opinions, but that's a big thing. So like, know what the outcome you want is. Know
And
what
when you
your,
say,
go ahead.
when you say know what the outcome that they is, do you mean what they're willing to sell for? Do you mean they're willing to do after they sell? All of those things?
I don't expect people to come to me and say, I want to sell my business and I will sell it for $20 million. I mean, that's nice. It really saves everybody a whole lot of time and dancing, but I get that people might not want to give a number, because maybe I'll offer $22 million. Like, the reality is, like, a buyer is almost never going to bid more than you want. It's going to be less. And then you just figure out like the bid ask and how big is the spread. So people should know what is the number that will make me sell the business, but also just like, what are the must-haves for me? And also educate yourselves on what is a normal must-have for a buyer. Take my earlier example. Either are you going to sell the business outright, Or do you want a minority investor to give you some cash and help you grow? If you're between those two things, that's a little weird. Like, figure that out. Because if you're going to take on new money, you're kind of resetting and going on probably a 5 to 10 year journey with that partner versus you're ready to sell the business and walk away tomorrow. Like, that's strange that somebody wouldn't be able to decide which is the right thing for them.
Yeah, either you want out or
but I get that a lot.
Actually, we see that too. We see that a lot too, where it's like, where people are like, well, I'd be totally fine taking the cash and walking, or, if someone wants to come in and we grow it together. Yeah, it's like they're torn between I want out and also I would love for someone to come in and save me and help me grow this business because I'm tired, and it'd just be really nice to have someone in my corner that has lots of money that can help.
I can understand where somebody's not really sure, but I think you should spend the time to self-reflect or self-awareness, like you said, and like figure out which path do you think is right. And it could be they're like, I want to be all things to all people and just see what the best offer is. But that's like trying to write software that solves every problem in the world. It's not going to really solve any of them. So, if you're talking to me and you're not sure if you want investment or buyout, I'm going to be confused. And then if you go talk to a growth capital provider who invests in minority stakes and you say, I may take minority investment or I may sell, that person's going to be confused too and not attracted to that deal. Because well, if you're not committed to this company, because you may sell it, like, this isn't a good deal for me. So going back to your earlier question of like, what do I like to see when somebody finds us? And I'm happy to talk to people early, but if you're serious about selling the business and you in your mind have said, okay, I want to sell by, this calendar year, I hope you know what you want. I hope you know what are the most important things to you in the deal. And on the list of those things, this, but like, is cash the most important thing? Is timeline to actually walk away from the business important? Like, I'm going to give you 3 months and then I want to wash my hands of this, or I'm willing to help for longer than that. If that is an important factor, know that and put that on the table. Having a job after the sale, a lot of people, that's important. Like, they want to have a job after the sale. Okay. Seller financing, is that on the table or is it not? Do you want to sell to somebody like us who plans to hold the business for a long time? Or are you okay selling to somebody who's going to sell it again in 3 years? And there's no right or wrong answer to that, but like, have an opinion and know what's important to you. And have service providers like you, Omeed. Like, I think I mentioned, if somebody comes to me and like, I think bankers and brokers are optional if you've got your act together, but like, a deal attorney is not optional. Your accountant knowing what's going on, I don't need to meet that person, but if you plan to sell for X amount of dollars and you don't know after taxes and transaction fees, et cetera, what amount ends up in your bank account, that's a problem, because you're going to find that out eventually. And, it's going to slow down our deal, or it's going to make me look like a bad guy because you didn't think of taxes. So that's why I coach people, is just like, think about it in advance, think about it annually, because if you're a self-aware person, your attitudes are going to change annually. Your relationship with your co-founder may change. Their desired outcomes may change. And so if you're thinking about it annually, you'll see those gaps and you'll be able to plug those gaps as you go, and you'll just be better prepared and better informed when you do go to, actually sell.
So you mentioned founders knowing what their must-haves are, and you pointed out some great examples of what those must-haves for the founders could be. Would you be willing to share some of the must-haves that you look for as the buyer?
Yeah, happy to. I mentioned a couple of them. Profitable. We like profitable growth. Growth isn't necessarily a must-have. I bought businesses that are flat, but we believe that we can grow them. The number one on the list is trust. So, and that seems weird. And a lot of people on your podcast may not say that, but if I don't trust the seller, I'm not interested in their business, because if I overheard a conversation, I was in a group and somebody's like, well, I'm thinking about buying this business, but it seems like the seller has been creative with their taxes and their accounting, let's say. And a small business, family owned things, you see a lot of weird stuff. And I kind of leaned over and I was just like, walk away. Don't do the deal. Cause like, if they're cheating on their taxes, you don't know what other things they're doing illegally. And so another thing that I encourage sellers to do, not just when dealing with me, but dealing with anybody, is just like, be straightforward about the flaws in your business, because every business has flaws. No business is perfect. And if it's something important, just put it on the table. right? It's like, an example is like, and this isn't necessarily some people wouldn't consider this a flaw, but something that is important. I'm going to make it up, but like, okay, here's my customer list. FYI, this customer that's 20% of my revenue, it's run by my cousin. It's just something important for me to know as a buyer, because if that relationship is important and your cousin walks away because you're no longer the owner, it's important for me to know. And so I would encourage a seller to like disclose that without me having to ask. And because if you don't disclose it and then I find out or I ask, that now I don't trust you as much as I wish I did, because like
Totally.
you probably knew that was going to be an issue for me. And if you just tell me, we'll talk through it and I meet the cousin and everything's fine. But if I find out without you telling me, and that's just kind of maybe a trivial example, but like if there's something that a buyer is going to be worried about, put it on the table and talk about it. Don't try to hide it, because we're really good at this, and we will typically find any scary things in a business. Another obvious one of dealing in software stuff is like, if you've got a mountain of technical debt, just say that. We've had to walk from deals where we and the seller have done a whole bunch of work, and then we get into the technical due diligence and find something that is material that they could have told us up front. And we may not have walked away from the deal if we know up front, but you can kind of build that into the process earlier. I just encourage people to not try to hide flaws, because any professional buyer is going to find those things. And you build trust by just getting those things on the table early.
That was the big thing that I was getting from what you were sharing. Distilled as a summary is like, trust equals transparency. Like, just be transparent. And typically the two kind of most important aspects of a deal in terms of due diligence are customers, tech, and do the numbers add up? Those are kind of the three primary things that a buyer is going to look for. Do the numbers add up? Is the tech good? And what do the customers look like? Where do they come from?
Yep.
So those are
another one to add to the list that's super binary. Usually, like, is there any outstanding litigation against this company?
Yeah, that one is like,
but surprisingly, like, we have to ask.
I know. For me, I'm like, do we even have to bring that up? Like,
should be disclosed, but often it's not. Even when somebody's using a professional banker or broker, they should be coaching the people. Just, hey, put this up front. Like, we got sued by this customer. It's settled. No longer an issue.
Yeah, you don't come up during DD and then the buyer is like, wait, you didn't
disclose this. Now I wonder what
that?
other things you're not disclosing. Yeah, that's why trust is so important to me. But if you do build trust, like, it can make deals flow so much faster and so much better.
The earlier you have the conversation too, like, it just makes it so that could be worked through. Get like all the skeletons out of the closet early, have the difficult conversations, what they call cactus conversations, and then that smooths the process to the closing of the deal. If the person's not going to do the deal,
you want to know early, right?
Like, you want to know early.
Yeah, if you've got something that you're worried could kill a deal, as a seller, you want that on the table, because if it's going to kill the deal, find out now so you can move on to somebody where that's not going to kill the deal, but it's going to kill the deal whether you put it out early or late. So yeah, we're on the same page there.
Yeah, the thought process for a lot of people, I think, is, okay, let's get them, more invested, through the process and maybe build more relationship. But no, that actually is like counterintuitive.
Yeah, true. And I got to remind myself that, like, for some people that might work, that might be the answer. For example, a searcher who's got like one shot to get a deal done and they want to build a relationship with the seller and, both ways. And they might get ultimately super invested and really, really want to close that deal. For somebody like BigBand, there is always another deal, right? Like, we have, like, I'm going to be doing this hopefully for the next 20 plus years. And I don't think we will ever run out of capital. So it's my job to not get emotionally invested in any transaction. I have to be willing to walk away, which is easy for me to do because I know there's always another deal around the corner. And I'm fortunate that I have the capital and the team and the long-term view and the patience to be in that position. I recognize that other buyers don't have that same luxury. And so I can see your point of like, okay, you build trust and everybody is mutually committed to one another and they start overlooking problems to just get a deal done. I don't do that. And I still think it's better for the relationship if both people know what they're getting into and build trust together. But yeah,
That's the number one thing that when I work with searchers, like I have to be the constant reminder not to fall in love with the deal. And
I'm sure it's hard though, right? Like, especially a searcher who's been searching for 18 to 24 months and they're maybe running out of
just like
runway.
itching to get a deal.
Yeah. It's a tough situation.
Cool. So must-haves, profitable, trust is, kind of an unconventional piece that you look for in terms of transparency from the seller. Someone that you trust them because they're open, they're forthright. Anything else in terms of must-haves?
Must-haves for us. I mean, we're pretty flexible. We've had situations where a founder wants to keep working. Cool. We can figure that out. Had other situations where founders want to walk away. Like, that's fine. We need some level of, transition period. Totally, which I think is not asking too much.
Is there a standard transition period, 90 days, 180 days?
I like 6 months. Yeah. 180 days, because it gives you a time for, a couple of quarterly cycles. 90 days is a very short period of time. And in having done this a lot, first 90 days is sort of just getting your arms around a business. And the way we do it, I like to tell founders, we have a standard process that we use to get the business transitioned and start thinking about what we are going to do and do the planning together. I tell founders, and if it's a 6-month transition, I say, if we close on a Tuesday, Wednesday, you're doing the same job. And we're working the list together of like transitioning all the things, bank accounts and et cetera, et cetera. For the first 3 months, assume you're doing kind of the same job. Like our latest transaction, it was not quite that. We had a CEO in waiting that was ready to like come in and meet the team and start leading the team. But the founder did need to keep doing work. And I say by month 4, 5, and 6, you're probably going to start getting bored, because we're not going to need you to be at a bunch of meetings, but I want you to answer the phone when I call about, hey, there's this specific customer that I want to understand, or there's a contract here that we are now looking at that's a little bit different. Explain to me what happened there. Or like, hey, we've got this strategic thought of like how to grow the business or expand the product line, or maybe we've got another deal that we think we could buy and pair with your business. What do you think, founder? Do you agree with that approach? Or, hey, we've got this person who we think could be a great salesperson. You know your business best. Would you interview them? Would you talk to them? So we like that ongoing relationship with founders. And if it works well, then most of the businesses I've bought, I can still call on the founder years later and ask for advice. But I want that 6 months to be understood that like, you're part of our team as we're transitioning the business. And then after that, we should have our arms around the business, and we hopefully have extracted enough strategic information from the founder that they should be able to move on with their lives and not be obligated to answer the phone when we call.
Do you usually, it sounds like you let the business continue to operate as a standalone business. Do you roll any part of the business into singular platform? Sometimes holdcos will do consolidated, maybe accounting and finance teams or marketing teams, for example, or something like that. What does that kind of structure look like for you?
We like decentralizing as much as possible. And that was learned the hard way. My past business, I centralized a lot of functions and that didn't scale very well. Also in studying the greats in this space, Constellation, Roper Technologies, Berkshire, they all talk about like decentralization as part of what they do to keep the decision-making as close to the problems as possible. We do have consolidated financials at the holdco level, but we also empower, we give the CEOs the tools to like manage their business, manage their books. And then Jason, my partner, is their partner in that and helps them close the books and do the finances. But HR decisions, marketing decisions, I prefer to be at the portfolio company level.
Got it. This conversation wouldn't be complete without us touching on metrics. In terms of oftentimes when we work with sellers, they're always like kind of trying to come up with the valuation model. Do you have a preferred valuation model that you utilize as a buyer?
Nothing super special that we haven't heard before. We're a financial buyer in almost all cases, where we're looking at what's the return on our capital. And we don't have to sell the business to recognize that return sort of conceptually or on paper, but we look at a business as a multiple of EBITDA, or the EBITDA is small, a multiple of revenue. And I would say we pay fair market ranges for multiples of EBITDA or revenue. And it's really but there's dozens of metrics that we would love to have to just understand the quality of a business, to see where in the range of like really poor struggling business or most outstanding business I've ever seen. Wherever you fall on that range defines like what the multiple is. And the more we can understand a business and the metrics behind under the surface, the more precise our view of the business can be.
Is there anything more that you can share there in terms of metrics that you find that are important that you look at? Some people, think net revenue retention is really important, for example. Obviously, churn is a big one, in SaaS. Anything that you can share there for founders to know?
All those things, again, nothing new. Yeah, revenue retention, churn, growth rate, the obvious things. Something that I care about that most people don't measure, unfortunately, is employee satisfaction. Like, I'm a big team and culture person. And if somebody sends me a deal book or opens up a data room and they show that they've been measuring employee satisfaction for the last X number of years, and that has been growing, like that feels good to me. Most people don't measure it, unfortunately. They don't put it in the deal room, but that's something I care deeply about, because if your business is growing, it's profitable, your customer net revenue retention is a measure of like, do your customers stick around? Well, employee satisfaction is a measure of like, are your employees happy? Do they stick around? And are you treating them well? You've heard the same metrics 100 times from people on the podcast, and that's the only one that I focus on that is maybe a little bit different.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Could you share what that looks like? Because so many sellers are reluctant to let buyers have access to their employees like prior to the closing of the deal. So what does that process look like?
I think people should be measuring employee satisfaction for the health of their business, not with an eye to selling. I also always say having a great business to sell also means it's a great business to own. Right. So I think people should be measuring employee satisfaction. I think it should be a number, so like we send out occasional surveys to our employees and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend working here to your friends? What could we do better? What should we keep doing? And what should we stop doing? They're just simple stuff. But if it's a measurable survey that goes to people, you can collect and trend the data. Sorry, I forgot the question that led to that. Like, what should, people don't want you said sellers don't want to give access to their employees.
Yeah, till closing.
I get that. If there's key employees, it's nice to meet those folks. But if you're measuring it, it's a number, you can show me the number in the chart and say like, okay, I'm not going to introduce you to the people, but here's the thing I've been measuring for the last 4 years. And here's my employee satisfaction ratings. I think that's.
Do you find that to be true that sellers like often push back against letting you meet the employees before you actually close on the business, or have you found something different?
Most sellers don't want us to meet the employees before. Although I don't know, I think the bigger the business and the more a founder has been thoughtful about planning and understanding the process, they know, okay, meeting at least the management team is helpful. And so I don't want to. It may be unfair to say a bigger business and a more mature, thoughtful founder is going to, but yeah, I do find, especially smaller companies, if the team isn't aware that a sale is even happening, they definitely don't want to they don't want to give buyers exposure to the employees because they don't want them to get spooked. I'm a fan of transparency in general. And I do think if you're wanting to sell your business, it's good to at least talk about that with your employees, so you can kind of hear what's important to them and make sure they're on board. And not that you should let employees block a sale, but you want everybody to be kind of on the same page and excited about it. So
rather than like in fear of losing their jobs and
totally.
The typical stuff that happens when you just spring on people that you're selling the business.
Yeah, that's not good for us as a buyer. It's not good for them as employees because it just creates fear and uncertainty. So especially if a founder plans to do a transition period and then walk away, it's important for us to meet the management team and as many people on the management team as possible. And just to understand what we're getting into, just like you want to, do diligence on the tech and the finances, like understanding the team so we can kind of understand where are their strengths, where may there be weaknesses, and where are there gaps on the leadership team that we need to plan for and to plug. That's the reason to meet those folks and to build trust with the team too. Because once the founder walks away, like we need to have a good trusted relationship with the team.
Is the employee satisfaction audit part of the annual exit planning process?
It isn't. And I should also like reinforce, most people don't measure it. So if you don't have
Yeah, I
that
was just gonna
number,
say I feel like most people don't measure it, so it's like
they should. So like, if you're a business owner listening to this, I encourage you to measure employee satisfaction. And if it's a good number, share it with a buyer. Like that's just going to make me more attracted to the business. It
and if
isn't.
it's not, that's a not perfect
Then you
opportunity for you
fix it.
to work on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a good number. Well, congratulations. Now you know that you have a problem. Go fix it. And then you can
Yeah.
show the trend upward. And then you say, Kevin, look at what I did. I fixed this number and you should be happy. So your question, employee satisfaction is not part of annual exit planning. And that's intentional. So when I built the workbook, it was intended for owners of a business. And some people ask me like, should I do this exercise with my management team? And I say no. If they're not owners, no, because at the end of the day, the owners have to decide what's best for them and best for the business. And if I own a business and I think, well, you know what, I'm gonna sell in 2 years, or I'm gonna sell when I can get X amount of money, but my chief operating officer doesn't want me to sell. Well, okay, well, I'm the owner. I got to decide what's good for me. And like, I may want your opinion, and I may want to like make sure the business lands in a good spot so that you're happy, but like, you're not going to tell me not to sell my business. It's intended for any owner of a business. And I also encourage people, I think I said, to do it separately and then come back together and talk about it so you can expose if there's any problems or gaps where you're not on the same page. And I think, understanding what your employees' long-term vision and dreams for their own career is important, but that's part of being a manager and knowing your people. But exit planning, I put in a different category that's for owners only.
Interesting. This has been awesome, Kevin. I really appreciate your time on the show, man. So much good stuff has come through. Would love, to close things out here. Do you have like a final thought or tip for founders out there that you really want to drive home for them in terms of like a tip of the day for either founders or acquirers or both? It's up to you.
Tip of the day, I hate it for founders. Go to annualexitplanning.com, download the workbook. Hopefully it helps. There's other stuff in there we didn't have time to touch on, and send me some feedback. Like I just want it to be helpful to entrepreneurs. And for buyers, I just think I see too many people, from like searchers to big time private equity folks, who just think they're the smartest person in the room. And it can be offensive to owners of a business and sellers. And so I would encourage anybody buying a business to just be like as respectful as possible, and just know that anybody who owns a business, they wake up every morning thinking about that business, and they fall asleep every night thinking about that business. And for you to come in and spend 2 months of diligence and think that you're going to magically run it better than them is a little bit offensive. And yeah, if you got a lot of training and a lot of experience and you're good at operating, that may be true, but a healthy degree of respect for people who have built good businesses is not too much to ask. And I don't see enough of that in our industry. So that's my tip of the day for buyers.
More humility, respect, and
humanity,
like giving, and approaching the purchase of a business from a place of like, hey, what you built is awesome, and I would love, like from almost like a place of love, like, hey, would love to be a part of this. Love,
and know that like it's a really emotional and stressful thing to sell a business, and that person has one chance to hopefully secure a pile of money that changes the life of them and their family. Like, know that it's stressful and recognize that, and don't treat it like a transaction.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. Cool. Well, for everyone out there, Kevin McArdle, BigBand Software, check them out if you're a founder. All the information will be in the show notes below in terms of the annual exit planning process that Kevin's developed. The website will be down there. If you're thinking about selling your business, I encourage you to reach out to Kevin. He's a great resource. They're also a great group of people to sell your business to, as well. As if you haven't heard that from this episode, let me go ahead and make that clear. Kevin, thanks for being on the show this week.
Thanks so much for having me, Omeed.
Absolutely. And for all the people out there that are a part of the SaaS Buyers Club, make sure you follow, subscribe, like, comment, all of the things. Leave your takeaways. We want to hear from you. What did you get from this episode? What did you find helpful? What would you like to see? Love feedback. feel free to email me, email Kevin, and leave us a review. We love feedback is incredibly helpful. Everyone appreciates it. And make sure you tune in next week. Thanks, everyone. Take care.